Welcome to the Backlash. I am your host, Rebecca Hargraves, joined as always by Mr. Dave Riley. How are you doing, Dave?
I'm doing well. How are you?
We're going to cut the bands today.
I'm hopped up on Above Time Coffee right now. So
the ads flow through you. You can find us on X at Real Backlash, our website, thebacklash.net. Support us on subscribestar.com/thebacklash, patreon.com/thebacklash. Send your super chats that will be read live right here on my YouTube channel, on our YouTube channel at Real Backlash, or to our website, thebacklash.net/superchat. Please sub to us.
Rumble Rants.
Also, we take Rumble Rants.
And we have a tip jar now. You can send us crypto.
There's so many ways to send us money.
Please.
Please send us money.
Do.
Find all of our links on thebacklash.net/subscribe. Please follow. We should take Spotify off there. We got banned.
Yeah, I know. I need to update the website a little bit.
We'd like to give a big thanks to our sponsors, ODGG Supply. What do I even say about them that's brief? Blanky mode.
If you want to go blanky mode, or if you want to go like hiking in the woods like a Lord of the Ring character, they sell cloaks too. So you can do all of that.
I feel like we shouldn't be like, oh, they sell cloaks. That's going to cause a branding issue for them.
Why?
Above Time Coffee Roasters, that is small batch, delicious coffee, handcrafted. We have Idaho Tallow, that is skincare without endocrine disruptors, and Antelope Hill, publishers of white positive literature. Without further ado.
But one more ado. Atlas Bullion.
Oh, yeah, we can't forget Atlas.
Hello. And we did a big space on Friday.
Sorry.
That she was not at.
I'm sorry.
Rebecca, you weren't there. I missed you.
I'm sorry.
But we did like an hour and a half long space about gold and silver and what to do to prepare for the imminent collapse of the American dollar or whatever is about to happen financially. Gold is up $120 today. It's a world record move. Silver's up $6 today.
This should have everybody sweating.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely sweating.
Just gold is at $4,611. It's closer to $5,000 than $4,000 now, and gold is at $85 an ounce. It's unbelievable, crazy, unprecedented. And then, did you see the video last night? Donald Trump, threatening
Jerome Powell
to bring charges against Jerome Powell. Like things are not going well in Trump land.
We will talk about all of this on our Wednesday show.
True.
On our Wednesday show. Without further ado, we have a very special, much awaited guest. I'm so excited. Thomas Rousseau, if you aren't familiar with him, the founder and leader of Patriot Front, the group that focuses on American nationalist messages, disciplined public activism, and most importantly, protecting our national identity and heritage. Thank you so much for joining us. It's such an honor to speak with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I have watched the show a number of times and always enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to a really good discussion with y'all.
Oh, wonderful. I don't even know. I don't even know where to start. I'm fangirling a little bit over here.
Well, you can. I have known about Patriot Front since the beginning, from a long time ago. A long time ago. And have been seeing your guys' work. And I must admit up front that I've been very critical of Patriot Front in the past.
Oh, I recall.
But this is something that has changed over time. And one of these instances that brought, at least for me, that brought about change was what happened here in Kootenai County, Idaho. Let's see, we've got some of the clips, if my thing is working. This was from 2022. 31 members of your organization, Patriot Front, were illegally arrested, detained, searched, had their phones seized, hacked, and then leaked to hostile media. And I was at that. I led my own counter protest of this gay pride thing. It was a rosary rally that wound up getting reported to the FBI. And so there was very few people up here that kind of knew what was going on, knew who the players were. And so me and a buddy of mine, Casey Whalen, were two of the only independent journalists that covered the trial. And I think because of some of our reporting, got some of these guys acquitted because it came out that the local prosecutor had committed serious prosecutorial misconduct, young blood violations, Brady violations, and we didn't know about this. It was, of all people, it was actually former FBI agent Kyle Seraphin that came out and leaked this story. And so that's up on the Idaho Tribune. I don't have that article up right now. I'll try to get it. But if you could talk a little bit about what that experience was like. What was it like being detained illegally.
And then branded in the movement as a Fed.
Right. At the same time.
Well, I've certainly had better days. I will say that Kootenai County Jail is actually the cleanest jail I've ever had the pleasure of being in, which I've only ever visited any of them for my political beliefs as an activist. But yeah, I mean, so we were there to do a protest, and we were there to protest in front of the Pride Parade, but at a distance. And there was what became this huge centerpiece of the trials was a piece of evidence that I actually filmed, with my producer, who's actually sitting right over there, on Thursday. I believe the event was going to happen on Saturday, so we filmed it on Thursday, and I was actually walking around the park on video, explaining to the cell phone camera, oh, here's where the limits of their permit are. We're going to try to stay outside of it. If the police ask us to move further, we'll move further away, yada, yada, yada. Almost as if I knew. I had this premonition that, that police might come up with trumped up charges. So I wanted to create this kind of exculpatory evidence. And then, of course, they arrest us, which we can get into, but then the phone gets seized. And then in my trial, I had a public defender, he was a conflict attorney, because we had ran out of public defenders in Coeur d'Alene, which is one, and we needed 30 something. So anyways, he asked for the phone, and then the prosecutor said, well, we don't have the phone, and we didn't have the phone, so you have to have the phone. And then we said, who has the phone? And he says, well, the FBI has the phone. And then, okay, show us the receipt, essentially the chain of custody document, because whenever you hand over evidence, there needs to be some kind of paper trail, and they couldn't show that. And then we said, okay, where was the phone before you gave it to the FBI? They said, okay, it was in our conference room, detective's office conference room. And then my attorney asked, can I look at your conference room? Can I go to see if it's there? And they said, no, you can't. No, you can't see if it's there. Of course, that's terrible. Why would you want to do that? And then that's really weird. That's really weird that you wouldn't let us look where you said it was before you gave it away. And then they offered, okay, you can see the document. You can see the document where we handed it over to the FBI. You can see that document, but your client can't. So you, the attorney, can, but you can't tell your client about it, which is unlawful. And you can't take any photos, and you can't quote it. And essentially, he's just going to walk into a room with an empty table, and he has to walk out of there not being able to say. Again, the amount of incompetence and sheer insanity of it was extreme, and it was all political. It was all because the guy didn't want to admit that they had to drop charges. And there's so much to talk about. We could do a whole episode on it if we wanted to. But at the moment, something that few people know is that a cop came up first and said that they were just going to trespass everybody from the whole city. I said, okay, guys, we're going to trespass you. You're banned from the city for 24 hours. And then we're thinking, okay, it's going to be like what happened to us in Philadelphia or in Boston. I know we were leaving the city of Boston on a train on one of the big subways with like 200 other normal pedestrians on Independence Day weekend. And the police stopped the whole train for like an hour because they couldn't actually get it up and running because Boston. But anyways, that's a totally other story. But anyways, we were thinking it's going to be like before, even though Boston happened afterwards, whatever. We were thinking like it was going to be happen before, where we get detained and then they give us a big old warning and then they let us go because they know that there's no weapons, there's nothing they can do. And that is what it seemed like. And of course, if you point 30 rifles at me and my friends and ask me to leave town, then I'm probably going to do it, at least at that time.
Right.
And then we sat down, and then you have the IDF trained police chief who comes around and says, actually, I've thought of this great charge that we're going to get everybody with. And I think it was some complication of the police needing to feel the machismo of being so prepared, because there was the Panhandle Patriot militia group,
yes,
which said some vaguely threatening things. So the police were totally on edge and, loaded for bear. And then they did all that. And then the police felt like they needed to justify their budget, I guess. And they also needed to send a message that they're in control of the situation. Then they handed it off to the city prosecutor, and he felt like he needed to vindicate his liberal consortium, political leanings. And the judges were caught somewhere in between the two, but they did not have, except for two cases, mine and one other, the judges did not have the sheer fortitude to just dismiss the cases outright. But the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. We've got some other reporting here that shows that it cost somewhere between $1.4 and $3.9 million for this investigation. And that, of course, was carried by the people here in Kootenai County. That wound up having to pay for all of this, because all of these lawyers cost money, and there was like 31 defendants. That's 31 lawyers, and every hour worked is billable, $300 an hour or more. And just unbelievable incompetence And it also revealed how much the local police are in bed with the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Anti-Defamation League, and of course this kind of blew everything up. And it's gone all the way back to the 1980s that Coeur d'Alene has basically been ruled by the Jewish mafia. And of course now it's changed. Instead of it being the left-leaning pro-gay Likud group, now it's the right-leaning Zionist Christians over at Candlelight Christian Fail. Anyway,
initially when this happened, I had an absolutely incorrect read of Patriot Front. I was totally wrong. I said some things on my previous podcast that I regret. But I've come to really love.
A lot of people had a lot of knee-jerk surprise reactions.
Yes.
But I mean, it was a crazy sight. And I mean, I understand when a lot of people were saying, "Oh, why did you have the shields? Why did you have, the little cap inserts? Why did you have all these things?" Because we had been attacked by Antifa before. There was nothing on us that was an offensive implement. Everything was meant to protect us in case Black Bloc showed up and started throwing bricks at us or started wailing on us. And all of that is meant so that we don't actually have to engage. If you have a big shield, you can stand there and let a guy wail on it without actually having to subdue him. Right. And I explained this and other things. The prosecutor said some video recently. He was on a news media thing, and he was saying, "Oh, this is clear they were here for a fight." But no, everything we did indicated that we were prepared to be attacked, not prepared to attack.
Right.
And that there actually were Black Bloc Antifa with weapons there.
Guns.
And there were other people with rifles and extra magazines and level 3 rifle rated plate carriers.
Yes.
But a piece of 8-inch thick steel is apparently illegal, but a plate carrier isn't. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I understand your aversion to the term optics. I've heard you talk about this a little bit, even though many admire Patriot Front's presentation, which I think is excellent. Could you delve into how you view the role of optics in political activism and why you think the concept should be de-emphasized? Because I'm still under the impression that it is important. And one of the things that I like about Patriot Front, I mean, there's this famous clip of somebody saying, like, I think it's Joe Rogan, where are all the fat people? And whether it risks prioritizing surface level appeal over authentic ideological depth and your moral conviction as a group.
That is an absolutely excellent question. So I remember back in 2017 when the phrase optics stopped meaning something about getting your glasses fixed and started meaning something about politics and activist groups and things like that. And I had already Patriot Front already existed at the time. And I felt like the conversation, even back then, quickly got out of hand, and it started being more about what you seem rather than what you are. And obviously, those should be tied together. And I have, long said that Patriot Front is not an organization which practices optics. I do not think for the sake of optical appeal that, we look disciplined, not because that's the optics, but because we are. That those guys seem like they're in good shape because they are. And we're not just in good shape for the visual effect. It's because of what it represents. It's because of the various facets of your life that are changed by you carrying out these actions. We look a certain way. We carry the flags. We love the Betsy Ross flag. We love the 13 stars. We love the red, white, and blue. We love the national heritage, the symbolism, the fasces, the torch, Columbia, all these American things. We don't do that as a cynical appeal towards conservatives. If we were trying to be appealing to conservatives, we really wouldn't have the opinions on race or Trump or whatever that we do, right? We do these things because it's super genuine and we're just taking a path which can intersect or cross over or overwrite any number of these status quo expectations. So, I think optics becomes a matter where you have your environment shaping your politics as opposed to your politics shaping your environment. But that being said, being a good person, being the type of nationalist, the type of man, the type of organizer and activist, that will look good, because I do believe good traits and virtues, they rise to they bubble up through the skin. They're visible. They affect everything about what you are, about how you speak, how you look, how you carry yourself, and the deeds, right? All of that I feel like is an outgrowth of personal virtue. So is civic virtue on the collective scale. So, I mean, in that sense, optics is good, but I think it's important to realize that optics cannot become separated, cannot become disjointed from the actual source of it, which is virtue, if that makes any sense at all.
I'm really interested in American nationalist movements because I have pretty much abandoned the American experiment. I'm more interested in preserving the people and the heritage. So do you believe that nationalism, in your view, is a reversion to the initial America project, or if you guys were really able to resurrect what you believe America is about, would it look like an entirely different country? And can you talk a little bit about how constitutional values fit into this?
Sure. So I would say, you say you're moving away from America and refocusing on the people. Well, I believe that America is the people. I believe that we are America. I don't believe that blacks in America are American. I think they are something culturally, nationally, linguistically, socially entirely distinct. Same thing with so-called Native Americans, right? They may be native, indigenous to this continent, but they're not American. They are something else. We are the only ones who are American, and that is our national identity. And I don't believe we can survive without a national identity. And frankly, I don't believe that there's anything else that has the wherewithal, the foundational might to unify our people. I think we have such a proud heritage on this continent. And, you can say that some people, and I'm not saying what you're saying, but I've seen people, on the internet, and they refuse to identify as American, and they say they're, strictly a white American, which of course I don't believe there is any other kind, or they abandon the label entirely, but they're still proud of their heritage. But the people you're proud of, those ancestors, they were American, and they were proud of it, and they were fighting for their people just as we fight for ours. I think it's important to distinguish the legal existence of the United States from the national existence of the American people. I think that, if you look to Europe, there are countries in Europe who have known, at least in the last few hundred years, every single form of government, whether it was communism, fascism, monarchy, feudalism, imperialism, whatever. And those nations still exist. Those nations still have a right to exist. And they do still have a core expression of their peoplehood, of their nature that makes them distinct. And Americans, we are very much connected to a singular iteration of government, that you could say. We've had the same republic. Well, I argue that it's no longer a republic. It has long since degenerated into a democracy, and then a plutocracy, usurocracy, and Judeocracy, whatever you want to call it. But, anyways, we've had, at least on face value, the same government, whereas France, Germany, so on, have been through 8 different forms of government in the last few hundred years. So it's easy to conflate the two. And I do think there is a sort of intertwined nature of our traditional forms of government and our nationality, but they're not entirely the same thing. So I do believe that certain facets of our Republican virtues, and I don't mean the GOP, I mean a republic being something which is less democratic than a democracy, something, like ancient Rome or, ancient Greece. That was the ideal form that the founders were trying to envision. I do think there is something about the commonality of a republic, the idea of an agrarian man rising through the ranks of society and being a leader, a chief among his people. I do think there is something of that nature, of the expansiveness of our continent, of the stock selected of Europe to come over to this new land, this new world, and how many of them perished, and how many of our cultural, footnotes, how many of our cultural, milestones are from the engine of the frontier, from the cultural dynamo that was the constant expansion, the constant chafing against our borders as a country. I do think there is something so uniquely distinct in our national heritage that I want to wield it against our enemies. I want to take the strength that lies within this land and within our blood, and I want to wield it like lightning against everything that seeks to dispossess us. And I think, I see people and they leave it on the table. And I think that is it's wasteful almost. And I understand so deeply that the government is corrupt. I understand so deeply that our institutions are captured. But I do believe that there is something to our peoplehood, which is tied into our culture and our heritage, which is fundamentally unerasable so long as we exist on this land.
One of the things that I love about Patriot Front is that it defines what we are for, not what we are against. And I make an exception here in terms of alliances that are anti-Zionist, because I think it is such a huge problem. Do you think that that is folly? Do you think that because we are having some growing pains in the movement, accepting people that are anti-Zionist but do not align on the America First issue? So do you think that this is to our detriment that we are adopting members of the dissident right, let's call it, that are merely anti-Zionist, but largely opposed to us and other very important social and cultural issues?
Right. Okay. So I believe as a first stance that your cultural and your ideological center should always be within your nation, if you are indeed a nationalist. Everything that we believe is focused from our nation outwards. So I believe, there's ultimately two sides of politics. There's ultimately that which is for and that which is against the nation. To that being said, I have no issues conducting what amounts to diplomacy or positive relations with anybody who is not hostile to me. I'm willing to, we were speaking a little bit about the Patrick Bet-David interview. He is a capitalist, multicultural Iranian millionaire, which I have absolutely nothing in common on any level whatsoever. However, I had positive results from speaking to him and conducting what ultimately culminated to interrace diplomacy, right? And I think that's useful, and I think there should be a flow of ideas, and I do think we should be able to converse with people. I think ultimately there's so many different political beliefs and nations and other things shoved within this country that if we lose the ability to talk to one another and actually try to compete, if we don't have competition, we have conflict. So I do think we should try to keep things in a positive manner as much as we can and use debate wherever we can, because, that's, without such, I'd be out of a job. But no, I know it's important that we're able to share ideas with anybody and actually compete in that respect. However, if you're talking about a binding alliance, right? We can think back to George Washington's farewell address, very immortal words, when he said that we should avoid binding alliances with any part of the foreign world, right? We should avoid hitching ourselves at the waist to any of these other people, because ultimately, at the end of the day, I do think that there is a commonality of the anti-Zionist or anti-Jewish interest or whatever is aligning in that moment. But I don't think it's strong enough to persist across an actual movement. I think it's something which can prevail at moments in time, but I think you'll realize, and maybe not y'all in particular, but the general person will realize that when it's actually time to work together, you'll find that Muslims and Christians find, if they're working together, they will have that surface area and realize they have less in common than they thought they did. Mm-hmm. That the shared enemy will not be enough. And I think these kinds of multinational, wide scope coalitions only work when they are subdivided. They only work when there is space between them. And again, I'm not somebody who goes out there and feels the need to disavow and the need to counter-signal everybody who has a slightly different interpretation or a slightly different depiction of events as I do. I think it's important to, like you said, showcase what you're for, right? And just, I'm going to be the best that I can, and I'm going to present the best that I can, and I'm going to create something as great as I can. And I'm going to let that speak for itself in a lot of instances. And if you want to compare PF to another group that does things differently, I'm not going to go on and trash that other group and say, oh, well, we're better here and they're so bad and they did this and they did that. I'm just going to do my best to be the best and then look at both and you make up your mind. Of course, I'm biased, right? But it would be weird if I wasn't. So I hope that explains things. I think, coalition needs subdivision, and generally speaking, you need to keep your cultural foothold always within the scope of your own nation, and then look out if you are going to look out at all.
Dave, I just have one more question. Then I'll let you get it. No, I'm sorry. I've totally hijacked this interview.
It's our interview.
I know. I'm sorry.
Hello. It's fine.
I'll let you get in there in 1 second. Another question I have along these lines is we're also seeing this fracturing on the Venezuela issue, because I think
the ICE issue.
Yes. On the dissident right, there are a lot of people that are America First that are feeling like we are morally obligated to continue to engage in imperialism and paternalism with other nations. And I think that we had more of a moral duty to do that when we were a moral country. And so now when I see what's going on in Venezuela, when I see what's going on in Israel, I'm disgusted by the actions of our country because it doesn't embody the virtues of the heritage Americans. So how do you feel about modern American imperialism, and how would you feel about it if we were able to return to the values of the heritage American system?
Right. So I am not in favor of the United States' alliance with Israel. Obviously, this is very well known. I don't think we should be militarily supporting them. I don't think we should be diplomatically supporting them. I don't think there was ever really a possibility for a positive relationship between the United States and Israel. And if there ever was, which again, I don't think there was, then their spying, malicious actions, governmental manipulation, et cetera, has long since abandoned that. And Israel should be a pariah state. And we should let the rest of the Muslim world decide what they want to do with Israel. And maybe the Israelis and the global Jewish committees that represent them will have a change in their behavior, which will allow them to finally have peace in the region, or not. But that won't be our that will be beyond our involvement in anything. I think it was Thomas Paine who said during the American Revolution, I don't agree with everything Thomas Paine says, but I agree with him on this, that America is so well situated that all she has to do is trade with the rest of the world, and she will be happier than any other. I think as far as the Middle East is concerned, that is true. And then there's the matter of more domestic affairs. I do think America lends to the Monroe Doctrine. I do think America does have a sort of responsibility over the Western Hemisphere. Now, that doesn't mean we need to expand, statehood all the way to, Argentina. But I do believe, as President Monroe said, that the Western Hemisphere should not be the playground of old world empires, that we are the superpower in this hemisphere, and we should not. And one of the greatest things about America traditionally is after the early phase, because when America was very young, we shared a border with the three largest empires in the world, that being Britain, France, and Spain. And America's formative years were with that knowledge that we were sharing a border with every world superpower. That's like if America was sandwiched between the EU, China, and Russia today. So the independence of our hemisphere was incredibly important. And I do think that is worth maintaining. But that being said, there's thinking that there is a good civic virtue to be practiced here, but then is the current government capable of exercising it? I certainly did not lose any sleep, unlike Maduro. I did not lose any sleep with his abduction or his seizure, I guess we should say. I'm not a big fan of the Venezuelan regime, past or present. I'm not particularly informed on Venezuelan internal politics, but I think most people, even those probably making the decisions, aren't either. I will say that it does make sense in a broad strokes concept to correct perhaps a potentially hostile power within our immediate sphere of influence. And, Venezuela is not on the other side of the world. It's on the other side of the Gulf, right? And a little bit further in there. But it makes sense. But then if you zoom out and you say, okay, well, if the main reasons were narco-terrorism or the main reasons were the drug cartels, then you would be doing it in Mexico. Then we would be doing strikes on the cartels actually funneling the drugs once they get to America, or it'd be domestic. I think, so much of the drug operation is domestic. Or China, I think, still makes all the fentanyl, which is killing the most people. I'm not sure what they were ferrying on those 8 to 10 fishing boats, but I don't think it was as much fentanyl as China is shipping in. Or maybe it's the same. Who knows? But anyways, if it's a drug thing, then you'd be attacking the issue from a different vector. And if it's a foreign influence thing, right, we're doing that to get Russia and China out of our sphere. Well, Russia and China, their biggest vector of power in the Western Hemisphere isn't Venezuela, it's the United States. It's the fact that China makes so many of the goods that the United States economy depends on. It's the fact that there's Chinese, slop in every single aisle of every single store. So that's the issue. If you wanted to focus on the Chinese issue with power balances, then you would start getting our industry back. And I don't know what Russia really had to do with Venezuela besides some oil shipments, but we have oil here. So again, it doesn't seem to be massively justified, I think, in the actions taken. But again, am I losing a lot of sleep over what's happening to President or ex-President Maduro? Not necessarily. I do feel like I'm not a geopolitics expert. I'm an organizer. I'm a domestic expert. I try to be the most acquainted with the lives and the situations of the men I lead and how we can best situate them for the life to come. But I will say that there is an element where everybody feels like they need, we were speaking about this very briefly, with social media and the idea of the attention economy, everybody suddenly needs to become an expert. Everybody suddenly needs to have an opinion on every single one of these big issues, which of course we can have, and we can talk about ICE as well. But it's not always productive towards, again, still good to talk about, because I'm more than just your average person in this context. But it's a lot of people find things to disagree about. I think a lot of people, when they're not organizing, when they're not acting, there are people in PF who probably have a lot of different opinions about the ICE shooting or Venezuela or whatever. Not that many different opinions within a reasonable scope. But the fact is, it doesn't really come up that much because we're working. We have a goal. We have something uniting which moves us forward. So we don't have time. I find a lot of people, if you just put them in a group chat long enough, any type of people, you put them in a group chat long enough or a social media platform and give them nothing to do but talk about current events, and they will start to hate each other. They will eventually, on a long enough time scale, they will start eating each other.
True.
So I think it's important to refocus on the positive efforts, the things that are within our control. But anyways, back to you.
So what is the goal? What is the explicit goal of Patriot Front? Is it policy adoption? Is it to get candidates elected? Is it to take over a party? Is it what are the stated goals of Patriot Front?
The goal is all of the above and more. The goal is to change the country, right? The goal is to create, grow power, and then use it to implement change, and that change will then allow us to grow more power and do so. Patriot Front is a nation within a nation. Right? Asking what the goal of Patriot Front is like asking, again, it's a good question. It's a good question, and I do have videos on it, but it's like asking, what is the goal of the English people? What is the goal of, of the Germanic race, right? We are a culture. We are a burgeoning interest group. And we want to grow outward against every boundary, against every threshold. So does that mean ultimately changing policy, changing the form of government? Absolutely. I would love that. I think that is necessary in forms and certain things. Are we going to get people elected at some point? Actually, yes. Patriot Front has helped out on a local level in some limited test cases so far with getting people elected. We have done that. That has happened. And I mean, that's not incredibly crazy when you think about it. The same exact type of manpower, the same exact type of ground game and logistics and motivated, high quality manpower pool. That's what we have is in vast excess of quality and quantity what most political campaigns are able to muster. And we can do it cheaper because our guys are zealots. They're motivated. They're radical. They're wonderful. So yeah, conventional politics, that is an angle. As far as institutions, yeah, that is an angle. We will try to leverage existing institutions and make our own. As far as the culture, the men, right? We want to grow the situation of our men. I think fundamentally, the manpower, the people that we have in America are people, the white Americans or just Americans. We are not good enough right now to seize our sovereignty. The act of reclaiming our sovereignty will prove that we are worthy of it, right? We need to be better in order to receive it. We need to be worthy in a sense. And that's not saying that we need to plead to the government to give us independence. No, I'm saying that we need to change in response to the pressures around us. We need our men to be better. We need our lives to be better. We need our families to be repaired. We need our communities to be stronger. We need all of these things. So fundamentally creating the stock of our nation that is necessary to achieve our goals is a huge aspect, because you can't just organize top down. You can't just be the political candidate and then hope that the right people will show up. Our target demographic exists, but it doesn't exist in the quantity that we need it. So we must both create and utilize our own target demographic, the people that we need. So that is an angle. And then we have, of course, our activism. And I guess people ask many times, what are the demonstrations for? What does that even do? It got you talking about us. It got millions of views on us and what we do in a way that, first of all, we're still very censored. PF has been banned routinely on all the big platforms, including Rumble. We had a Rumble account, but they deleted it. So we are still behind the censorship wall, unlike a lot of other people. And I'm glad that a lot of other people aren't censored anymore. I'm glad that nationalist content is going further, but like it or not, we're not included in that basket yet. So we need to create public spectacles and newsworthy events in order to punch through, and then people see what we're doing. They join the organization, because a lot of people with very intellectual opinions on Twitter and stuff like that will say, oh, well, that's so silly. I would never need to do that. I'm so much better than this. But a lot of regular, like salt of the earth, quality guys who have investments in their communities, or they have families, or they're young men who want to get involved in something, they see what we do as it is inspiring. It is purpose driven. It is a adventurous form of life that offers you some, reason to excel in a way that society, the culture at large doesn't anymore. It offers a pressure. And I think, men need a pressure placed upon them. They need accountability. They need community and brotherhood. So Patriot Front does all of these things. And I am not tactically inflexible, right? I believe that we should do everything that we can that is A, worth doing, and B, benefits the cause. So if that's conventional politics, then we're doing it. If that's creating nationalist venues and event spaces, then we're doing it. If that's getting fat guys to be not fat guys or lesser than fat guys, then we're doing it. If that means family, community, heritage events, then we're doing it. If that means fundraisers, disaster relief, posters, murals painted under bridges, all of these things are a great orchestral cacophony of tactics that all play into our single goal. And that also means that we have such a wide range of things that men can do, again, from everything I just listed to workshops, literature, there are jobs within the organization where people are interviewers, editors, video, photo, content, whatever. There's so much to do. And there's so many places for so many people of unique skill sets, right? Because again, we're a nation within a nation. So we need to be able to take a cross section of that nation. I don't believe in an organization that's just for, the rich business networkers, or just for, the super duper gym bros, or just for, the outdoorsy types who love orienteering, right? We need something which can cross and conquer all of these niches, and then synthesize every positive action and get it all facing in the right direction.
And that's something that's amazing about Patriot Front. I'm just glazing Patriot Front. This
yeah,
whole
you are.
It's yeah. Sorry, but they are able to do all of this without institutional investments, merely based on the personal and ideological motivations of its individuals, and that's why I think it's inspiring so many people.
I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. So I do think that's a big component, because when you're, and this also plays into infiltrating other groups, right? Or not just infiltrating other groups. I don't mean that as other activist groups. I mean that in the context where people say infiltrate the GOP, right? You're going to infiltrate politics. You're going into these spaces to leverage them. I think that can be done and should be done. And it is very possible whenever the internal strength of your community, of your collective, within your membrane, right, is more potent, is more virile and powerful, you are able to leverage institutions. When we have guys, in some cases, that go and network in other conservative spaces where there are nationalists, you will find lots of nationalists in those spaces. They don't quite have they haven't had the written invitation to be more proud of their nationalist sensibilities. Sometimes they have, and they just need the means to do so. But when you have our men, proud, convicted nationalists entering these spaces, we're able to leverage and persuade and inspire people because our fundamental motivations are stronger. That the men of Patriot Front are not in it because it's easy. They're not in it because they're contractually obligated. They have no salary to worry about. They are the American volunteer, right? The man who leaves behind, leaves his coat hanging on his plow, leaves the field and goes to do what his nation demands of him. That is something very much tied into our heritage that we also exercise on a daily basis. And that allows us to conquer these spaces without needing a lot of the material or institutional burden that a lot of these other institutions do. And I think that makes us more effective, that it's a through line of simplicity where we're able to wield the passion and the ideological zealotry of these men against the rest of the political landscape. And it's worked out pretty well so far. But anyways, back to you.
Man, I don't know how to segue the questions or whatever. So I'll just start with this one. Do you consider yourself a revolutionary?
Yes. So there are various definitions of a revolutionary, but I do believe that a revolution is a principle and not a tactic. A revolution doesn't just mean, some people equate, in order to be revolutionary, you have to believe in throwing Molotov cocktails at police stations, which I don't. I think a revolution is a principle of vast and comprehensive change. Now, I do believe that if my revolution was complete, where I could look out across, the new American nation state and be satisfied and pat myself on the back and say, we did it, that we would still have some things which are similar, such as I do think that the three branches of government in essence is a good thing. I do believe, and we mentioned the Constitution previously, I do believe that Americans should have a lot of the rights that they do, such as the right to face your accuser in court, or the right to free speech, the right to free assembly, the Second Amendment. I do think we should have these rights. I don't believe of myself as a revolutionary in the context of, by the definition, that you need to change absolutely everything. I think I am a revolutionary in the sense that we need vast change. I'm not going to integrate myself within the system. whenever I am interacting or I am sending men to interact with conventional institutions or systems of power, we're doing it, we're in these spaces, but we're not of them, right? We are a component that is an outside force that is making the rest of the landscape compromise towards us. And I think as we grow and as the nationalist movement and nationalist organizations and institutions grow in power, we always need to remember that it's more about, and you need to ask yourself whenever you're engaging in a new field, are they compromising in my direction or am I compromising in their direction? And you've seen a lot of cases where people gain popularity and they're more welcomed into conservative spaces, and they start making that equation in the wrong direction. And they keep doing it until they're totally absorbed and pacified, until they're no longer an effective agent for change. And I think it's very important that as a revolutionary, as a nationalist, and I do believe in order to be a nationalist, you need to be at least mostly revolutionary in the current, situation of the United States. You need to make sure that you are not trading virtue for influence, that you're not trading your convictions for wealth or compromise, and that is the harder path. It is more difficult, but it also happens to be right. And sometimes the most virtuous things also happen to be aligned with the most difficult things. And I think the nature's God, whatever you want to say, has placed it so on purpose. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does. There's also the space historically and within context is definitions are interesting, right? Because to call yourself a revolutionary, I would call myself a counter-revolutionary. Right? Where I actually would be for the total uprooting of the entire American system, because the American Revolution itself was Freemasonic in principle. It was against the old world order. It is the new world order, and I'm against that.
We could go over that, but sure.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about that? And then there are also some requirements to be a member of Patriot Front. I'm assuming you have to be 18 years of age, you have to be white, you can't be married to a non-white, you can't be Jewish. What about
all those? Very good.
What about? I studied a little bit. What about Freemasonry? Would you bar somebody? You would bar Freemasonry from your ranks if somebody was an avowed Freemason. Would they be allowed to enter Patriot Front?
I understand that the Freemasons are not currently running the government or the world. I think the Freemasonic institution is very much diminished from whatever it was previously. Yes. But somebody can't be a Freemason for just the same as somebody can't be a member of a lot of other things like that, because essentially it is a separate club, institution, membership thing, which commands your loyalty in a sense that, and it also is secretive. So I do not want members of the organization which I feel have a loyalty which may be contrary and outside of the organization, and also they're not allowed to tell me about it. Now, obviously, members in the organization, I'm not saying I need your absolute loyalty with everything. I expect the men of the organization to be loyal to their families, their communities, their careers, their friends and loved ones, and their faith and all those things. But with a specific thing like Freemasonry, or in some cases other political things, which Freemasons are kind of political today, that becomes an issue which becomes incongruous. Just for the same reason that, or not the exact, a similar reason why we don't accept active duty military personnel from the Marines, the Army, the Air Force and stuff, because you have a contradicting loyalty which is going to draw you away in some cases, and if the two come into conflict, it is going to result in conflict, and that's going to be better for neither of us. I will say that the American Revolution, just if we want to get into it a little bit, it was in contradiction to the old world order. It was. And I do think that was good in a sense. I do think there were really big flaws with the European monarchical system, especially the absolute monarchies, which had come to, monarchy wasn't always absolutist, right? It became as such in the 16 and the 1700s and maybe in the 1500s as well, because of emerging nation states and things of that nature. And then essentially the American Revolution I see in part as a pushback against those systems being tried to be implemented in the New World and failing. And then it was more of a people's revolution in a sense, not in a communist sense, but in the sense that it was representative. And I do think it was nationalist in a sense. And there were a lot of nationalist revolutions against monarchical systems, throughout the 17 and the 1800s. And a lot of them had to do with the fact that the people, a nation, recognized themselves as a unique culture. And then when you are recognized as a nationality, a culture, a being, a people, that you feel like you must be represented by the very same. And a core element of the American Revolution was that we are unique. We have diverged from the British people. And very early on, Americans still referred to themselves as British, as Englishmen. But throughout the revolution, throughout this political movement for independence and the conflict with the monarchical system, it became very apparent that we, either by our being here or by the natural growth of our own culture and heritage and our even genetic stock after hundreds of years of being tempered by this frontier, we were a unique entity. And that needed to be represented within a body politic. And then I do believe the founders looked at the successful systems in European history, such as the Roman Republic and some elements of Grecian democracy. And they were also able, if you read the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton, which I'm sure you all have some opinions about, looked at the Holy Roman Empire and the various, complicated, ineffective, very slow to respond systems of government, or the French monarchy, which I think we can probably agree was not incredibly successful in meeting the needs of its people at various components. And that plunged the country into disastrous wars. And then, Napoleon took over in the power vacuum, and that's not something you want to be able to happen in their country. Or you could look further back into English history and see that the monarchical system with absolute power vested in that creates issues with succession. And of course, you have issues with succession and evolution with every form of government because nobody lives forever. But I do believe there was a very genuine and a very successful attempt. It was successful to solve a lot of the issues of European systems of government at the time, and also find something which is more complementary to the American landscape, because there was a greater commonality of interests and people in the American context, because you did not have thousands of years for landed gentry to arrive. You did not have these 1,000-year-old institutions. So I do think there was a greater social mobility involved in that. And I do think, that would be a whole episode that we could go back and forth on that. But I do think there is something very positive about the American Revolution that is worth carrying forward.
Sure. And there is a distinction, and it's not without a difference with the American Revolution, in that when you look at the French Revolution, when you look at the Bolshevik Revolution, when you look at even like Hugo Chavez's Bolivarian Revolution or the actions of Simón Bolívar himself, these were revolutions against the natural order of things. They were revolutions against hierarchy itself. They were revolutions against God in a very satanic way. And that was not the same as the American Revolution. The American Revolution, to the extent that it was a Freemasonic revolution, true to a certain degree, but it wasn't like a godless revolution where they like in the French, I think they changed the days of the week from 7 to 10. They changed the amount of hours in a day. They abolished Christianity, etc. And so I think that there are some good things that came about from the American Revolution. It's much more of a mixed bag,
right?
I guess you could say.
I would say that a chief element of the American Revolution was not simply, and it was in some context a counter-revolution.
Yes.
Because a big aspect of the revolutionaries or the Continentals or whatever is that these rights that we are fighting for, we already were given as Englishmen. Our Anglo-Saxon forebears, with the Magna Carta and even before that, when you had your small strongholds, your tribal strongholds on the British Isles, these rights were something that our ancestors fought and bled and died for hundreds of years ago, if not 1,000 or more years ago. And then this upstart system of government decided to take, and again, this was even more recent because for about 100 years, the colonies had been governed very hands-off. And then King George decides to come in and implement all these new legislation. So in a lot of sense, it was returning to a natural order of the Anglo-Saxon rights as Englishmen that these men believed were innate, that we had already fought for, that were already attained through our blood and our civilization. And it was this new evolution of an ancient system of government which had decided they were no longer necessary. So in some sense, it was a correction and a return to older, more traditional primordial values.
So in addition to, Freemasons not being allowed to join Jews,
yes.
and active duty military members. What about FBI agents that want to join your organization? Would you accept an FBI agent that's very patriotic and wants to join Patriot Front and fight for the cause?
He's got a beard. He wears a red shirt.
No, I wonder if he would tell me up front. I think they have to tell you if you ask. I think that's one of the rules, right? No, so obviously you're not allowed to be a police officer either, or in any law enforcement. You're not even allowed to be an ICE agent. And in a lot of cases, any former police officers or any other form of law enforcement will likewise. Now, you can be a security guard, and other things like that. But a law enforcement generally of any kind will be an almost indefinite disqualifier, just because there is so much risk and concern. Even somebody who was a police officer and then maybe they stopped working that job 3 or 5 years ago, that could still be an issue, because he could still be friends with them and your life is still connected in some way. As the higher in law enforcement you go, you never really leave that sphere unless it's an absolute disgrace. And then those circumstances, right. I don't know if I want you there either. And that institution, that occupation still holds a lot of sway over you, especially with anybody who's involved in those things. For the same reason, like in the military, that the government literally owns your hide. So, if they found out you were a member, then they could say, hey, I'm going to need you to give me this information or do this thing or entrap this person. And if you don't, then we're going to charge you with something. And in the military, they actually can. They can charge you with a few various things, with lying on a form or whatever. I think there's some rule about you're not allowed to be a member of the military and be a member of an organization which espouses the violent overthrow of the United States government, which we don't do, for the record, but they would say that. So it creates a legal thing. And even if this person was a totally genuine, patriotic person who actually believed in it, which is possible, right? Which is possible. Much more possible in the case of your average police officer in a small town who genuinely thinks that this is the right way. I wouldn't want to harm that person. And I do think putting them in a position of membership would put them in a greater danger than just, obviously, every member of the organization assumes some level of risk, but I want to avoid, precipitous and unnecessary risk.
Of course.
So then that would be to both sides.
And speaking of risk, what do you do as the leader of this organization? How do you take care of the people that are members? What measures are taken to protect them, to protect their identity? Because for those of us that have been involved in this thing, I've seen a lot of good people's lives ruined because of activism, because of doxing and all of this kind of stuff. So what do you do to protect your members from these threats?
So there's a lot. There's a lot that we do because we've been around for a long time, and every single attack that could be employed against us has, and we've learned the hard way in a lot of these instances. And a lot of people's lives have been changed, but I will say, as a blanket statement, that every single man within the organization that I have ever seen who has lost a job, or he's been doxxed, or he's had his house targeted, every man who has stuck with us and worked with us and been present in getting out of that, his life has turned out for the better long term, because we have a community and we are ruthlessly willing to stick our necks out for each other and to make sacrifices for one another. And the larger our organization grows, the more effective our job and housing networks are. And the more we're able to protect people. And that's just on the once something has already happened, right? There's a whole preventative side to this, which is, of course, that the organization uses aliases. We have certain ways of planning our events so that people's information is not risky. A big reason that we use box trucks, famously we're riding around in box trucks because we're not going to use our personal vehicles. Our events are planned, our large events. We have people who are skilled in these roles that they're conducting within these actions. They have been doing it for years in many cases. They know what they're doing. They're very effective. They're able to tackle problems that show up on the fly. And a lot of these things are structured so that people's information is protected. It's a big reason why we wear masks as well. A lot of people, they recoil and they clutch their proverbial pearls at us wearing masks. But there they are, an anonymous person on Twitter or a person saying not too controversial things, so they don't really understand, but that's fine.
Yeah.
So we do a lot, both internally, externally, logistically, materially, and and if I had a full comprehensive list of everything we do to prevent these things, well, I wouldn't tell you because it would make it less effective. But we are successful in doing this, and sometimes, incredibly against our wishes and every measure, you are going to get hit at some point. Yeah. Something's going to get through. Something is, some blow is going to land, right? but it's really about what you do after that. It's how you recoup. It's how you correct. I think organizations and men need to be judged largely not just on, the attacks they receive, but on what they do in the aftermath.
Absolutely.
How they recuperate, how they correct themselves, what they learn, and then if those continue to happen. Because in 2021 or 2, I believe, we had big, expansive hacks and leaks, and that hasn't happened since. Again, we correct our mistakes and we move forward. But there's no way, if anybody ever believed it, there's no way that we're going to be able to reclaim our destiny as a people without a few people getting doxxed, without attacks being made against us. We just need to make sure we're taking. So as a leader, I want to create a culture where men are willing to sacrifice for the cause and are willing to endure hardship for the sake of the cause, right? But at the same time, I need to make sure that I'm only asking for the sacrifices that are necessary, and I'm vindicating every single sacrifice that I can. And on the other end, that hardship that men are willing to endure, that I'm charting a course logistically, materially, organizationally through that hardship, which is as short as possible to achieve the goal that we have. And that is the kind of organizational handshake which keeps the organization together.
Would you be opposed to answering some audience questions that came through about Patriot Front and your work?
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. On my end, from Actualized Motion, what percentage of Patriot Front have children? That's all that matters. Am I right? Activism doesn't repopulate an extinct species, does it? I don't mean to speak for Patriot Front, but when you improve men, when men improve themselves, they become more attractive to women. So I would imagine that family formation is the obvious outcome of something like Patriot Front.
Yes. So Patriot Front is a very pro-family organization. I don't have an exact statistic. We have a lot of family men. Probably a majority. We have a lot of young men as well who do not have families yet. But the key thing is that, yes, creating families is important, but that's not enough. Because there's lots of men out there. There's lots of American men out there with families, and there's lots of Americans. There's tens of millions of Americans out there. But it's not just a quantity issue; it's a quality issue, and it's an organization issue. We could have many more Americans in the current state that we are. There could be another 10 million Americans, again, with the exact same qualities and circumstances that the ones that exist now have, and we wouldn't be in a better position as a people, maybe demographically, but we also need to think about quality. We need to think about coordination. Just like people who say, oh, well, why do you need to be in Patriot Front? Just get rich. Why do you need to do activism? Just get 1 million followers on Twitter, right? You need to understand that it's not just the doing of the thing, but it's the doing of the good thing, like creating a family, like being involved in your institutions, like being a fit, healthy man. And then it's doing that in conjunction with other people, and then synthesizing that positive action, that good deed, with others doing the same good deed or other good deeds. And it's about orienting all of that in the right direction. So again, families are incredibly important. We actually facilitate that, right? In our networks across the country, men who are having a new child in their family will have a fundraiser done by their local network and get them, both the child and the parents, months of supplies in some cases, where and again, for the parents, dealing with the newborn, which can be incredibly stressful, and the newborn itself, various supplies, and they will do big supply drives. So we actually are facilitating that, and we're creating a culture where families have spaces to go to, where they have, positive events, where wives and siblings and things like that can become friends and have positive ties, which exist entirely within a culture which is fine-tuned to be as it should be. So yes, family's very important, but not enough by themselves. It's not just a good deed can stand alone, but it shouldn't.
What do you have
More
on your
questions
end?
for you? No, you're done? Okay. This question comes to us from James Johnson, and he's a good guy. I got to meet him. He was one of the 31 members that was doxxed and arrested. He, got thrown in jail, and we've since kind of become friends, as is the case with basically every single person I've ever met from Patriot Front. I've never met anybody from Patriot Front that I didn't like, that wasn't like a virtuous good guy. By the way, not to glaze, but so James Johnson has 3 questions for Thomas. One, What would you have done differently with the CDA situation? 2, thoughts on the similar incident in Arkansas with the Blood Tribe arrest. And 3, did anyone share my Patriot Front documentary with you?
Okay. So number one, what we could have done differently. Again, there were matters outside of our knowledge, right? We did not know the disposition of the police as acutely as we could have, because there were maybe 5 of them in the park at the time, but they had an entirely separate mobile command center. And we did not know something which would only become, which would come out later, which was the internal communications between the FBI and the police and all those things. So that we had no way of knowing certain facets within our limited scope at the time. So what we could have done, so there was also so much that was up to chance, because what happened probably wouldn't have happened if one person in a parking lot had not used certain choices in their language, in their dictation on a 911 call to the police. There was that guy walking a wiener dog who actually later appeared in court. Yes. I don't have anything against him, of course, although he was an inciting movement.
And not to cut you off, but I do want to address this, because I did a podcast over the weekend with a group called the Founding Principle, and they asked about this. There have been several groups of people that have maliciously taken things that I said in a chat group out of context to frame it as though I was the person that called the police on Patriot Front. And I'm sure that, I don't know if you've heard about that. It was a pagan group on the one side, and on the other side, it was a Zionist group that both, because the whole thing was shaping up to be another Charlottesville. And I'm friends with the Panhandle Patriot Motorcycle Club. I actually wrote their press release to try to de-escalate that situation, because having been at Charlottesville and seeing the way that things were coming, it's like, we need to manage this situation or it's going to get way the fuck out of control. And so, I took control of the Rosary Rally. That was initially supposed to go straight through the Gay Pride event, and I said, we're not doing that. I worked with the sheriff. We got a park. We were able to pray in peace, and everybody was fine. Nobody got doxxed, et cetera, et cetera. But there is a video that people need to be aware of from Casey Whalen. It's North Idaho Exposed on Rumble. This is the only copy that I'm aware of on the internet. But in this 20-minute clip, this is the guy that that actually did call the police on Patriot Front. He was a private military contractor that was working for the Marriott Corporation, which, by the way, is buying up and building a giant high-rise in Coeur d'Alene right now. There's cranes, they're building it, and so we can play just a small clip of this.
Recall something going on that day that caused you to call the 911?
I do. Excuse me. Let me phone. Let me dump that. Sorry. I'll turn it.
The buffoonery.
Yes.
Now everybody else is all morning and you need to.
Well, anyway, this is kind of boring. But if you want to go, if you want to go listen his testimony.
The thing is that man made a heat of the moment. I don't think he was malicious. I don't think he really knew how the police would respond. But had he used different language, and something that I have done before and since, is that I will actually seek out the first police officer I will see in a march, and I'll say, hey, Thomas Rousseau, Patriot Front, peaceful political organization. We're doing a protest. We're going to walk around. We're going to stop, maybe say a few words. We'll be out of your hair. If you have any questions, I'm the guy in the hat, and I make sure that I just really hammer that in. And then that cop should then go radio that in, and then you kind of break the ice with law enforcement. Again, I don't do long interviews with law enforcement or anything like that, but I want them to know, I want them to have it on record and testimony in case it ever comes up, what I'm telling them, what I am doing and what I am here for. And again, cops are people at the end of the day, and they are usually very, very on edge in a lot of these political situations. So, and they certainly were in Coeur d'Alene. So there was a lot that happened that was a exact confluence of issues. And the issue with the Panhandle Patriots, which again, I'm sure they're good people. I think that one press release that got all the law enforcement really, really heated, could have been phrased better perhaps.
Well, that wasn't even a press release. It was a guy that got up on stage at a political rally and vowed to go punch somebody. So the press release was clarifying, we're not doing that. We're peaceful, blah, blah, blah. Yes. Anyway.
But, so a lot of things, it was a confluence of a lot of unique circumstances. But anyways, what could have been done better? Walking in from a further distance. So, you want the police to see you, and this is something we do, right? You want the police to see you when you're walking, right? Police are like bears, because they don't like to be surprised. You don't want to jump out in front of them. So ideally, if they see us walking from a long distance, that could have been better. You don't want to forewarn them. You don't want to tell them you're going to be there ahead of time. You want them just to see you coming from a distance. Besides that, you could say that, oh, well, we shouldn't have had shields or anything like that, but they made up their mind before they saw those. So that could have made a difference. And actually, in the arrest report, right, in the actual dossier arrest report, when it lists weapons contained by the detainees or whatever, it said none. They didn't mark any of those things as weapons. As much as the prosecutor tried to say those flagpoles and shields were weapons, the police did not actually consider them to be weapons, which is phenomenally interesting. But anyways, so walking in from a longer distance could have made a difference. We could have used a different form of transport, but that, pickup trucks could have been more logistically complicated. I think one thing, if I had to say it, because again, a lot of these things were out of our control, and obviously the chief blame goes to the actual institutions that arrested and charged us. Because even again, if what had happened was that one lower ranking cop just trespassed everybody from the city and said scram, then that would have been it, and we would have made our point. We would have made our point that this is a bad thing that we're protesting, and then you can't even protest it legally. Yada yada. We would have made our point, and everybody could have walked away happy. There were a lot of very confluencing factors. But anyways, walking in from a longer distance, maybe taking a different mode of transport. And you mentioned, that you had the protest across. I don't remember what the name of the park is, but the other park in town. Mm-hmm. And that actually, I saw that. I saw that the other protest was moved from right next to the Pride in the Park celebration to across town. And that is why I wanted to, like others ended up doing throughout the day, because we had scouts walking around as the event was going on and telling me what was going on. I wanted to make sure that I was getting as close to the thing as reasonable and lawful to create a confrontational dynamic, which is what I wrote in my document. And that became a whole centerpiece of the investigation because they said, oh, that meant fighting. That meant riot, right? But what I actually meant, and I know this because it was my own document, it was a note cheat sheet from me to me. I knew that I wanted to say, oh, well, I don't want to protest across town, which again, I totally get it. But, I wanted to protest the thing where it was. I wanted to get as close to it as was allowed and let the people I was protesting, I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to see, hey, I came all this way. I don't like what you're doing, and I want you to know that I don't like it. I wanted there to be, confronting of ideas, and that became a whole thing about confrontational dynamic. But that I actually wrote that in response, not in a deleterious response to the other protest being moved across town, but as a thing of I'm trying to affirm that these ideas are existing within the same space of air, and they're confronting each other, and that is the dynamic. But so that explains that, and that was a huge, wonderful part of the investigation. My attorney did not think that was very good language on my part, and I shouldn't write things in that manner. But I had to tell him it was my own personal note sheet. I wasn't planning on this being national news, at least not in that way. But anyways, so those were the things I could do differently. Oh, and so the other questions, Blood Tribe. Similar thing. They were detained. I don't think they were charged. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to detain them when they did. The police, I think they stopped them on a highway, not even on a shoulder, which is dangerous. They could have stopped them before they got into the box truck. I did see parts of the video. It seemed like harassment. The police probably wanted to detain them after they were in the moving vehicle because they're more condensed and they're easier to manage. That is a downside of box trucks, especially on the way out from an action. And, the size of the protest may have made that more easy, and maybe they needed more time to gather more officers because you don't know how people are going to react. I don't think the Blood Tribe guys had any firearms, any weapons on them at the time, which is probably for the best, at least in my personal opinion. I don't like to have any weapons whatsoever at our protest. People don't even have pocket knives or anything. That usually helps too. Because again, I think if anybody is going to have a gun and be a potential danger to you at a political event, there's about a 99% chance it's going to be a police officer.
Yes,
and you're not going to win. You're not going to win that shooting match if it starts. In a lot of places like DC, if you're worried, like there's already snipers out everywhere, counter snipers, and there's already, if anybody's trying to throw volatile projectiles in your direction, they're probably going to be doing it past a police line, and then they have more to worry about than you do. But anyways, the blood tribe thing, very unfortunate, legal harassment. But that is what we have come to expect from certain police departments. What was the third question?
Third question was,
have you seen his documentary?
James Johnson did a documentary about Patriot
I did
Front.
see some people share it, yes, to answer the question.
Very good. Man, I'm coming down with something again. Having kids is just like living in a petri dish constantly. It's rough. Reinhardt sent $200.
Oh, thank you, Reinhardt.
Thank you very much, Reinhardt. You guys are true believers. I admire your courage of voice and conviction. So many that claim to be on the side of our people are cowards and unwilling to platform patriots like Thomas. Hi-all to you all.
Thank you so much, Reinhardt. We really appreciate it.
Chat. The Orthodoxer. For Mr. Rousseau, I admire you, sir. I cannot believe I'm older than you. I know a young man at my parish who will apply to Patriot Front. I pray that you convert to Christianity, and to Blonde and Dave, I eagerly await LP being the third in the studio host. Well, yeah, he's going to have to move out here.
Yeah.
So we're putting pressure on him, putting screws on him. Thomas, you're not Christian?
I am not very religious, no. I have a deep and fundamental appreciation for Christianity, not only its teachings, but also its role in American history. A lot of members of the organization are also pagan or practice other, heathen religious practices, and I am also I'm very interested in that. I look at it and I ask them questions, but I am personally, you could say agnostic. I don't like putting a whole lot of labels on it, but I'm not very religious. But again, I'm deeply appreciative of those things. And I operate an organization which I would say is very pro-religious, although not everybody in the organization follows the same sect or the same denomination. But everybody in the organization is either Christian, pagan, or neither. But there's no room for foreign religions or other things like that. And everybody we are very uniquely situated in Patriot Front as having no religious turmoil. There is no conflict between the faiths. There is no sectional rivalry or anything of that nature. We have kept the peace very sufficiently on that. And perhaps that is helped by my own personal ability due to my disposition of being able to kind of mediate between various denominations and divisions when I can. So personally, I am not, but my faith is, it's a personal matter at the end of the day. But yes, to answer your question, no, I am not, but I'm deeply appreciative of it.
Okay, so everybody pray for his conversion. No, I'm kidding.
I was like, Dave, get it under control. He's going to do the Dave thing.
I have read a lot of the scripture. I have read the words and the teachings of Jesus Christ, and I do think there's a lot of good lessons in there, and I think people would behoove themselves to review that on their own time as well. So I would say, and I have attended church a number of times, with other members, throughout my history in the organization. So again, and I have also, observed, pagan religious ceremonies where people are interested in those things. So again, I'm very much appreciative of it. I just haven't personally, put my stake down anywhere in the sand.
What religion are your parents?
My parents are both, I guess you would say, culturally Christian. We did not go to church extremely commonly, which is probably in some degree why I did not grow up incredibly devout. To tell you the truth, we did not go to church extremely frequently. It was more of a holidays, you go on Easter and maybe before Christmas kind of thing. Probably, it was definitely some type of Protestant denomination, maybe Baptist on my mother's case.
I was just curious because whether or not you were like a secret Mormon or something like that. That's apparently a thing.
Well, if I was a secret Mormon, I wouldn't tell you. But I do have a lot of respect for Mormons. I like the audacity of saying Jesus Christ was American. So who knows? Maybe they'll be in the top of the leaderboard for me converting.
North Idaho Exposed. Casey Whalen sent $5. When is Patriot Front coming back to Coeur d'Alene now that the 1-year trespass from the city has expired? And listen, we need to do everything we can to tank tourism in this city. These hotels.
I can help with that.
Please.
We should have a local event. We would love to have you speak.
Yes.
I'll keep that in mind. But let's not make a big deal. Let's not make a big public knowledge about it.
Selling tickets right now.
I have actually been back to North Idaho. I visited. I did an interview with the Red Ice folks, and I hung around there, and I passed through Coeur d'Alene, which is interesting to see all the places. It's like, hey, that's where I was handcuffed. And I do think it's so interesting how Coeur d'Alene before and after what happened to Patriot Front. Things didn't fundamentally change to a big extent, but I feel like we changed the political reputation of the city in a big way.
Yes.
A lot of people, not solely myself, but not entirely myself, but a lot of people had this idea that Coeur d'Alene was like, man, if we can get away with anything, like it's so right wing, it's so conservative and traditional. Everybody here is practically already an American nationalist. Some people were going into it thinking that, not the guys in the column itself. Everybody was very vigilant of whatever could go. But I do think that we really put that myth to bed, in a sense, and then threw it into the ocean because
it exposed so much corrupt. And because, I remember I moved up here in 2020 and I'm like, I finally made it. And then I spent maybe a month looking around.
You're
and
like, no, it's totally paused
I'm taking
here.
notes and I'm like, that's not good. That's not good. You got a Human Rights Education Institute on Main Street. That's fucking
We've got
definitely
problems
not
here
good.
for sure. Yeah.
And so I had been trying to raise the alarm bells and everybody thought I was crazy. And then all of a sudden this happened and it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe that Dave guy was actually kind of right about a little bit of this. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. Musing Truckers sent $50 on Rumble.
Thank you.
Sir, I've never heard you speak before. Why is it that you think Patriot Front can assemble peaceably while the left can't go 1 minute without engaging in violence and creating chaos?
Well, I believe the left's ideology and also the stock of person that they select for they are deranged, much more likely to be violent. And also the left has a greater allotment for being allowed to be violent by the systems of state. They have a broader decentralized activist movement, which relies much more on mob tactics, which make violence or getting away with violence much more effective than an actual membership organization. If any man in Patriot Front goes out and does something, very stupid, then that is likely to. So actually, this is a thing where people say, "Oh, you're in a membership organization. One guy could go out and do something very stupid, and that would be RICO, and the whole organization goes down." Not really. It's not anywhere near that simple, but broadly speaking, there is a greater share of responsibility in a membership organization than the left, which has, among their anarchist groups and other groups like them, tons of decentralization where, the government isn't really effective. And also the government hasn't really been looking at Antifa and all these other groups. But, and also because we don't want to be violent,
right.
Patriot Front theoretically could be and would have the capability to be, but I genuinely do not want that. I have seen political violence. I have seen people come to harm. I do not want, and I'm not, some people think that, we're doing all this political stuff in the lead up to the Civil War, the Boogaloo, all this other nonsense, the collapse. But I think a lot of people like that really don't understand conflict on that scale. And they think, everybody thinks that they're the cool guy, pushing the guy out of the helicopter, but you don't realize that you're probably the guy getting pushed out of the helicopter. You're probably the guy. You're probably, you're the one who is dying because you can't find antibiotics. You're the one who, your buddy with diabetes is going into a coma because, somebody else raided the gas station before you, right? This is not something that we should want as people who want the best for our people. Accelerationism is not a sane ideology. The idea that we're going to attack our own people and make everything worse and then they're suddenly going to come out in droves and love us is the conception of an insane person. Obviously, that is not what this commenter is saying. But yeah, the left, it's because they're bad and because we're good, to answer the question.
True. Very true. The question that everybody in the live chat has been asking for, I'm sure, from Book Track Grooves, who sent $10. Mr. Rousseau, have you ridden a horse?
Yes. I wouldn't be befitting of the hat and boots if I hadn't. I would love to say that, because I grew up in Texas, that's how I went to school every day. No, but we have a few members with land and stuff like that, and I've ridden around on horses, and I am not what I would say is a skilled rider, but I know my way around. I know the reins, so to speak.
Very good.
But I would love to get much more acquainted with that. With traditional things like horse riding and sailing and other very, very analog methods of transport and sport itself. But I don't have as much time as I would.
Well,
but I'm going to get more into it.
Maybe that's why he asks.
So you said rioters. guess riot cops on horses work, I guess. It's not something I would try personally.
Yeah.
Because those are very specific types of horses. People have asked me, Thomas, you should ride a horse in a march. Like, that's a great idea, but that's going to be like a country, that's going to be like a ranch horse, and somebody with an umbrella could get that horse to throw me 20 feet onto the pavement. Don't get any ideas, right? And like, those riot horses are very specifically trained, and if you're ever going to do that, then you need, you need lots of preparation. But anyways,
and Book Track's last question is: Have you done any gardening?
Have I done any gardening? No, not really. No, sorry. I hate to disappoint. I would love to be able to say that I can. I'll look into growing some potatoes or something. Just
for your credibility.
We got to get potatoes. I don't know. Are you Irish? I mean, we should get some tomatoes going on, right? Rico, restricting Italian community organizations. I mean, we got to get some tomatoes going on here.
No way.
EthnicAmerican.org sent $50.
Oh, thank you so much.
We need to take back our identity as what is an American. Have you ever considered that we are ethnically American based on our founding fathers from We the People to 1790 Naturalization Act, where only white/European can be ethnically American?
Yes, we are ethnically American. Now, some Americans may be genetically identical to Europeans from certain locations. I think a lot of Americans are probably still genetically identical to Englishmen. But I think ethnically, in the sense, nationally, our nationality, as again, and I'm speaking of the white people in America, not the white people who got here 2 days ago. I'm speaking of the white people who have assimilated to the American culture, which is harder nowadays because the American culture is frankly harder to find. But we are a unique nationality. And I would say it is not at all untoward to believe that we are an ethnicity as well, and in many, if not all cases. Personally, I have ancestry that extends from, Scotch, Irish, Southerners and Puritan Northerners, and Cajun thrown in there somewhere, which is how I got my last name. So, I am something of, your European mutt. Which, I believe is a derogative term. But, I do think Americans are American ethnically. I do think you can tell a lot about what kind of European they are as to where they're from. And I feel like Americans, in a lot of ways, are one of the most distinct and also one of the most pan-European nations. I think the other nations of the diaspora, such as Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, are much more singularly Anglo. In their disposition, and just like the Boers are much more singularly Dutch. I think America is very unique in that it is both a diaspora nation of the European race and that it is also pan-European, that it has a core culture of Anglo-Saxon traditions and classical forms of government, with a New World, frontier, backwoodsman tinge to it all. But it is also pan-European, that members of many various nations of Europe were able to assimilate into that foundational culture, which I think makes us uniquely powerful, I think, as long as we're willing to use it. There's so much in our heritage, like I said, that is there to use if you would but wield it against your enemies, which is what I'm doing.
We've got another big super chat from James Johnson, who sent $50. I'm going to have to cool it on the... We got a lot of big super chats today. It's getting annoying. James Johnson sent $50. Thomas, not everyone can join Patriot Front, nor should they. So what should these or other men do ultimately to help out our cause?
Well, I would say a lot of people that maybe think that they can't join Patriot Front, you might be able to. Again, our membership qualifications, you have to be older than 18, able-bodied, right, which means you have to have all your limbs and be able to see through both of your eyes. At least one of them, perhaps. But you have to be able-bodied. You have to be able to work and coordinate. You have to have the social, ability to work with other people and learn and all these other things. So a lot of people actually can. And if you think that you're on the threshold and you're not sure, then submit an application. The worst thing that could happen is you get denied, and it's not personal. But outside of that, I think following the personal virtues that are good deeds within themselves is productive. People can always share our content. People can always interact whenever I'm doing podcasts. They can always submit questions to me. We always want followers for our pages and people to get our content on the new platforms. We're still ruthlessly censored on platforms such as Instagram, X, TikTok, and others. I'm missing one of the big ones. But anyways, we're still censored on all these platforms. So it's important if people can ever share our content on these things. I know a lot of people are very online, so that should help them. And, if you know anybody, right, if you are genuinely unable to be a member, then you probably know some people who are, right, especially if you're a nationalist, if you're networking. And I think just simply, spreading the word about the organization and being a good representative to the extent that you can be is important. I think there's a lot that people can do. But, prepare yourself for success is what I would say, in a nutshell.
Raven Resolve sent $50. Thank you for the big super chat.
Thank you.
What is a realistic goal for a future minority white America to maintain our white society? Discuss the competing strategies of remigration versus intentional communities versus balkanization of the United States into independent states.
That's a great question.
Okay. So now remigration being deporting a bunch of people, right, that shouldn't be here. That's kind of happening. Again, not in the scale that it should be, but, America is doing a lot better than any other white country that I know of in deporting people right now. Again, not good enough, but that's something. And I do think it's important to realize, talking about remigration or mass deportations, that certain things which seemed impossible just a few years ago have turned out to be, with the proper amount of willpower, expressly possible. I remember going all the way back to 2016, the idea of actually, Trump in his first term said, we want to close the border and stop people walking across the desert to come into the United States. And so many liberals and even a lot of conservatives said that was impossible. There's no way you can do that. There is no power on earth. There is no government so strong and diligent to be able to stop the migrant caravans and find that. And then, again, I'm not a big Trump supporter, but I support some of the things that have happened. I think some of those things are good things, outside of the actual administration. But then on Trump's second term, it turns out that you actually could just close the border the whole time. The whole time. Decades of presidents, decades of border legislation. Turns out you could actually just flip the switch and press the button and it would be closed. And that would be, illegal immigration of that form through that means, through that vector, would be solved. So I do think that there's a lot that can be talked about policy, right? There's a lot that we can say about, here's exactly how I would solve this issue. Here's the legislation that I would pass. Here's the way we could get around loopholes in that legislation. But that's not the problem. The problem isn't a lack of solutions. The problem is a lack of willpower. The fact is that the government does not have the willpower to make these solutions manifest. And we need to create, as Patriot Front is, a battering ram of willpower aimed at the halls of power to integrate that will and that conviction and that purpose with the actual mechanisms to make change happen. So in terms of, conventional present existing institutions deporting people, I think they should. I think they should continue. I think ICE should continue deporting all the foreigners that they can, and then they should find even more. And they should do what they promised to do.
Yes.
Will they? I'm skeptical. I'm highly skeptical, but I don't think that they should stop, if that's what you're asking. The other thing, intentional communities, that can also happen. People are doing intentional communities right now. The RTTL project is an example of a different organization. PF also builds intentional communities. We don't have, land ownership, but the networks and the men and the families within those are creating a community of intentionality when they meet, when they work together, when they create businesses together, when they work on all these projects together, when their children play together or homeschool together, there is an intentionality there. Again, just like I talked about at the beginning of the interview, you can practice all of these things in concert with one another. And in fact, it's generally better if you do. So I do think, that is going well. PF recently we did a massive work delegation to the RTTL community in Arkansas. And we got maybe a month or two of work done in a single day. Again, Patriot Front men are hardworking. They are very reluctant to complain. They are good in adverse conditions and in hard circumstances, willing to sacrifice and travel for the sake of virtuous and arduous labor. So we made a positive effect, and we actually helped them with a lot of things that would have taken a very long time for them there. And I do think there's good people out there, and they have a very good strategy and a very good set of tactics. And I wish them the absolute best. So again, we're helping with that. And in terms of balkanization, it just doesn't seem realistic to me. It seems too much of a kind of pie in the sky idea. I've heard a lot of people over my years say that, actually, this is the perfect area in the country that we should be looking to balkanize. And a fun fact, out of all the people in all the regions that I've heard say that this needs to be the ethno-state, if you just stitched all of them together, you would have the whole country. You would have the whole country. So, and then let's say everybody agrees and everybody's going to move to their ideal little ethno-state. We're just playing musical chairs at that point. So I do think, again, on a long enough time scale, is something like that possible? I guess, but then so isn't anything. But I think realistically, should Americans right now be moving to a certain area with the intentionality of separating it from the United States? I don't think that's realistic. But do I think it is wrong to move somewhere for the interests of your family and yourself if you need a career or you want a certain type of, that is fine. That is good. You should move to where the opportunities, if you want to move. Now, I do think there is a good argument. I know Ben Shapiro said, oh, well, if there's not good stuff, Americans just move to the middle of nowhere because you can't afford to live in your city anymore because it got, turned into whatever. Anyways, so I don't think you should have to. I think there is a very strong argument for digging in your heels and saying that I won't go, I won't budge, I'm not going another exit down the highway. I do think there's a very laudable aspect to that. But at the same time, men in the organization move around, and sometimes they do so based on the opportunities that other men in the organization are able to give them. We have a strong network over here. We have a tight-knit job, network over here. There's a housing network. So we can offer in some parts of the organization, we can presently offer a family a place to live, right? With, obviously an opportunity, right? We can't give them a free house. Sorry, we're not there yet. But we can give them an opportunity and a connection with a place to live, a place to work, and a total plugged in community where that man, can work out and train with other men. He can uplift himself. He can go to cultural events. His family can be invited to a lot of those things. They can start going to church, or they can have other religious connections with other people locally. We can offer that. And that is a good reason to move if that pursues your interest. But again, moving or doing political strategy purely for the aspect of secession, I think is unrealistic and perhaps missing the immediate benefit of these tactics, the immediate benefit of these things in your own lifetime for something which could be far off in the unforeseeable future.
Yes.
So there you go. That's the answer to the question.
Yeah. Let's see here. From Book Track Grooves, $10. Rousseau, what is your thoughts if the Irish or Russians sent you aid, even though they are from another country? Have you been able to build a tavern inn? What should women read against bad propaganda?
What?
Okay, so specifically the Irish or the Russians. That's an odd collection.
Is he asking if they're funded by the Irish or the Russians?
It's really the Irish behind everything.
It is. It truly is.
So the Irish or the, so we don't accept, I don't accept donations full stop. You're not allowed to, I'm not a grifter, actually, fun fact. I don't accept donations. You cannot send me money. You cannot send Patriot Front money. I would much rather have, the sweat of a man's brow than the dollars in his pocket, is what I say.
Not us.
But we don't accept, because what would happen then is if we became very much flush with donations from an outside source, with a donor class, then we would, and again, I know, we're on a show, we're receiving donations. This message is a donation. There's nothing wrong with that. I have an organizational pathway, which, I believe if we become reliant on a donor class or a bunch of donations, then we become dependent on it. And then we become subservient to it. Or then I feel like I am impinged upon making decisions about Patriot Front's strategy or message by what the donors would think. And then we have now lost executive control of our message and our actions.
You would also come under so much scrutiny.
Not in line with our organizational framework. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, you would also come under so much scrutiny.
Oh, yes. And then especially with foreign countries, we definitely wouldn't accept money from foreign countries, because I think that would, there's some, I haven't researched it because we don't do it, but there would definitely be some things, especially from the Irish. No, I'm just joking. I have a great amount of respect for the Irish. There's a lot of good Irish nationalists and all that stuff. And I do lament what is happening to their country immigration-wise. And I don't have any connections with the Russians either, in case anybody was curious. What was the other question? Something about taverns?
Did you make a tavern inn?
I have not made a tavern inn yet. We are looking to build nationalist institutions and spaces and venues, but currently, right now, that's more in the space of meeting halls and meeting spaces and gyms and things like that. Eventually, we should have a tavern. Eventually, we should have a tavern and a bed and breakfast, and it'll all be very wholesome and wonderful. So I'll work on that.
That's one of those things that, like,
it'll be the first
identity, the identitarian. No. I can only think of it in the German. The identitarian movement in Austria and France, like they organize around bars. They have a large group of people that own bars, and that's always
Why don't
cool.
we have that? I can't even find a place for this event.
I know. We need to get. There's this nice German restaurant on Sherman Avenue, and I wish one of our people would buy it.
I know.
But
Yep.
that's not going to
The
happen.
beer garden.
Yeah, it's owned by a libtard.
Oh.
Anyway, the Winged Hustler.
Venues are sort of the hardest part about nationalist organizing is find proper venues. But
Oh,
that's
yeah.
something we have to do. That's something we have to build. And
Yes.
it has to happen collectively. But also you need people with good business smarts, because you can't have one of these businesses solely rely on nationalist meeting spaces for its entire profit. And
Right.
you also need community acceptance. It's a long path, but it's definitely part of what we're doing.
Yes. No, absolutely. The Winged Hustler sent $20. I'm an experienced artist. Syntax error. I'm an experienced artist, and I would be happy to offer my services, so I will be looking into your website and joining up.
Oh, that's so great.
Very good.
Amazing. We need more artists. Actually, it's very important. We have a lot of art within the organization. I don't know if y'all know this, but I do practically all of the graphic design for Patriot Front. I am also an artist, and I also was misunderstood in art class growing up. But no, I mean, we always want new artists. We always want people, especially with whatever they can do. So especially a classically trained artist. I offer, and we offer as an organization, spaces for men to use their talents, whether you're skilled in the art of video editing or painting or graphic design or what have you. We want to use that. So whoever that guy is, join up, and I hope you make it through, because
And you don't take any lady help, I suppose.
No ladies. No women.
No, not membership, just help.
I don't know. You're helping.
Women can and do assist the organization very frequently through their husbands or their fiancés or whatever.
That's fair.
Because we have a lot of family events, we have a lot of things. But I do believe that the organization must be fraternal in the sense that membership is restricted to men.
Of course. Yeah.
We've seen it in the nationalist political landscape.
You don't have
for
to
very
justify
long
this.
time,
We all
where, the
we all
inclusion
understand.
of and again, I have nothing against women. I obviously, I think that they're half of the nation we're trying to save, of course. But I do think that certain natural boundaries and roles need to be maintained, of course. And I do think we have maintained a lot of domestic tranquility within the organization because there are these very clear roles for the two sexes.
Someone's got to bake the cookies in the casserole.
Totally. Absolutely.
So, Jimmy,
At our large events, usually it's a man slaving over a massive pot of chili, but sometimes the ladies do help as well.
based. Jimmy ICU sent $9.99 over on YouTube. It's a penny off. All right. It's not a matter that we should have those rights. It's that we already have them by virtue of existing. People seem to forget the inalienable part.
Yes.
Yeah, very true. Patriot Maxing sent $10. Can you ask Thomas what he plans to actually enact change on the national level besides doing marches? Because it's great to organize and get a collective group of men who are like-minded, but at what point is it time to actually enact real change?
He did answer that about 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Change is everything, right? So, I mean, we've already changed things, right? Patriot Front has already changed how people, I say this in our big video on our front page. We say it in one of our flyers that we've handed out thousands of, that we're trying to change the lives, minds, and bodies of the nation, right? Patriot Front has already changed people's lives for the better. We have already made men into better versions of themselves, and that has affected how people think. Patriot Front has already changed the minds of thousands and thousands of people in terms of what they think about us, and by extension, our ideas, and by extension, the world, right? So that is change. Change is something you can attain every single day. People give the conventional political mechanisms way too much credit, and they give them too much legitimacy. You need to realize that politics is one lever of change and one lever of life. There are many times throughout your day, throughout your week and month and year, that systems other than the federal government are exerting force upon you, whether that's media, whether that's your friends, whether that's your community, whether that's your religious institution, whether that's the thing in your pocket, your phone, whether, it's the algorithms, it's social media, it's all these other things, right? Whether it's your job, whether it's your boss, whether it's the systems of money or whatever. There's so many different things which exert force upon you. And it's not just the president's, executive orders or Congress's legislation. There's so much that is pushing. So you need to come to change with the idea that it is something you can achieve every day, and you need to take it where you can get it, right? So when do marches suddenly become acts of Congress, right? This is not a linear thing which you can put into a 1, 2, 3 scale. Again, we build social power and then we use that social power to wield political power. And political power is everything. Everything is political if done with the right intentionality, right? And we do. And spaces, coordinating materials, right? What material wealth, institutions, assets, things like that, changing how people act. And yes, we do and we can involve ourselves in conventional politics, and we can even find that we're more effective than some of our contemporaries pound for pound. So when do we plan to enact change? We already have.
All in for the win sent $10 over on Entropy. Does Patriot Front do anything like Toastmasters, where people practice public speaking without learning the hard way in front of a crowd?
Yeah, there's some events, book clubs and things like that, where people get the chance to speak. I'm not the only one who ever gives a speech in the organization, so there's opportunities for things like that. I don't know if we have a speech giving centric class in the organization, but generally being in the organization will help you with those things, because you will be put in situations where you're, working with people, speaking on your ideas. So if you wanted that, I would say join, and you'll probably become better at it through many means.
Sure. All in for the win also sent, he sent like 5 questions. So this one is, how many of the Patriot Front members have you sparred with that have prior martial arts experience before joining?
How many specifically that I've sparred with?
Yes.
Maybe a dozen, 2. I participate in some training meets every now and then throughout, and I've been in the organization almost a decade now, so a lot. I'm not sure. I would say about a quarter of the members in the organization have some form of martial arts experience, if they have, if they're training. But maybe less than that. But I mean, we do train men up, and they do get a lot better. We have a lot of grappling and jiu-jitsu, practices, and many men have belted up, and they've gone from a white belt to I think it's a blue belt, and then a brown belt, and we even have a few black belts. So a lot of men learn a lot within their thing, and I'm definitely not the most martially inclined out of the members of the organization, but that's what I have them for. So.
All in for the win sent $10. Have you heard of the left's Operation Turn Texas Blue? Texas is an important state. Will this issue of its new demographics get enough GOP attention before election season? Is there something that's out there fighting this leftist plan and demographic change?
So I am not intimately familiar with the project itself. Will the GOP react to demographic change in Texas soon enough to keep it being a GOP state? You could say that they've already done that with the redistricting. You could say that they've already done that with coordinating a bunch of stuff with ICE. Will that be enough? Time will tell. Is that comprehensive enough to justify or to satiate a nationalist? No, it is not. But are things fighting against it? Yes, we are. Again, are we in, am I running the Texas state government? No, I would like to, but I'm not. So, that is a big question, and not all of that is within my control or purview. But, again, there are positive forces and there are things that need to be helped. And, you, whoever you are, should take a more active role in the history you are describing. I have a means to which you can do so. Go ahead.
All in for the win also said, if we did Operation Raise the Flag in America like the UK did, would there be a stronger motivation to do activism in leftist or quasi-Mexican seated areas, or play it safe in ready-made GOP patriot cities?
Okay, so if we were going to do Operation, put up a bunch of American flags, would we want to do them more in leftist areas or GOP areas? Both. We currently put up signs, whether they're stickers, posters, banners, flyers, whatever, and we do them everywhere. We do them everywhere, all over the country. We put up materials everywhere from Manhattan, New York to Manhattan, Kansas, from Fairbanks, Alaska to Miami, Florida, and everywhere in between. I believe in the famous adage quoted by Theodore Roosevelt that you should do what you can with what you have where you are. And men of our organization find themselves in rural back roads and in big cities and everywhere in between, in suburbs and coastlines and mountains and so on and so forth. And they should be active wherever they are, because there are Americans wherever they are. There are Americans willing to work and fight our dispossession everywhere in the country, and we need to find them wherever they are and organize with them wherever they are. So, yes, to answer the question, both, everywhere, all the time.
All in for the Winston. Another $10. Thomas, as a Texan, were you raised on cowboy westerns? If so, which are your favorites, and which would you recommend others to watch that are new to the genre? Also, have you tried the cowboy shootout style sport in your free time?
I did watch Westerns growing up. I don't know if I would say I was raised on Westerns. I'm a big fan of the Dollars trilogy with Clint Eastwood. Of course, that's a classic. I feel like I would be remiss of myself if I didn't answer that. I could probably list a few of those. I like those. Those are the classics. There's probably a few more, but they're not coming to mind. I'm not really good with on the spot. What's your favorite X question? And the other question was, what was that? What was the next part of the question? Movies.
Have you tried cowboy shootout style sport in your free time?
No, I have not. I haven't done that. I do have a friend actually who did it in the organization, and he won. So maybe I'll have to give it a shot at some point. Looks fun.
Are smaller nationalist groups more effective staying independent, or would consolidation help, or just create one big target?
I think everybody should join Patriot Front, and I'm biased in this respect. But I think Patriot Front is big, and we are effective. Does that make us a bigger target? There are smaller nationalist groups that have the same tactics employed against them, and that actually, I would believe, harms them more. Because aggregate, if you have 50 members and 15 of your members get doxxed, that's a lot harder to deal with than if you have 500 or 600 members and 15 of them get doxxed. I think a larger organization is more able to weather these things. I think there's a difference between the scale of the organization and the what would actually make certain attacks fall more harshly on this organization, which would be its legal existence. Patriot Front is not an LLC. We are not a nonprofit. We are not a 50C18 or 501c8 or whatever. Patriot Front, in terms of a legal reality, does not exist. It is a social volunteer movement. Patriot Front is a state of mind, in a way. So in this sense, our scale does not come at the expense of our scope. Other organizations, this may not apply to. I cannot speak to all of them, but I would say it makes a lot of sense. I have seen so many organizations, as I'm sure y'all have, come and go over the course of my years in organizing. I met a man once, and he had been involved in a bunch of other organizations. I had like 4 or 5 by the time, he got around to joining Patriot Front. And I told him, while you were involved in this organization, I was working with Patriot Front. While you're involved with that organization, I was working with Patriot Front. While you were involved with the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th, I was continuing to grow the singular entity, which reciprocated each sacrifice and paid back each investment of time and energy and blood, sweat, and toil, right? But you'll find in instances where men really, dedicate themselves to a lot of these other organizations, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. But if they do turn out to kind of go belly up and they flop, then you really have a question there of where all that time went. And now sometimes you do get something out of it which lasts beyond that, and that is valuable. But I think you should be able, and the prudent onlooker should be able to look at Patriot Front and say, wow, well, they've survived all the big attacks that have felled many of these other organizations. And you ultimately want an entity which vindicates your sacrifice and rewards your investment. So I would say join Patriot Front. And again, I'm biased, but it would be crazy if I wasn't.
Yep. All in for the win with another super chat. Jeez. Some groups like focusing on helping people out of destructive habits like drugs. Does that usually mean people seek help from Patriot Front, or that Patriot Front outreach groups goes to where the need is most visible?
We do not seek out people who are having issues with addiction, because there's so much more that goes into somebody being an effective member. Generally, that person needs to seek us out, and then they need to be good on other aspects, right? But we do help men recover from issues with drugs. We do. Again, they need to be capable of being a good member despite that, and you're not allowed to do hard drugs as a member of the organization. But very commonly, we'll get guys in the interview room and they say, yeah, I'm good on all these things. He's a good member otherwise, but he occasionally smokes marijuana or he's trying to stop. And we say, well, your membership's going to be conditional on that, that you need to stop that in order for us to move forward. And maybe you can slip up once or twice and we'll work with you on that, but that needs to be the trajectory towards sobriety. And the same thing with, with alcoholism or kratom or all these other little things. We do create a culture of sobriety. All of PF's events are sober. Practically, universally, nationwide. And we do have a big culture of holding other people accountable because we have something that's valuable, which is, the purpose and the community. And that imposes a cost if people aren't able to keep up with that. And if they're not able to take care of themselves and be the person that they need to be, not only for themselves, but for their health and their family and their community and ultimately the nation. So yes, we do help those people when they come to us and when they are salvageable. But we are always willing to work with people. Yes.
Strong families make strong nations. Are unmarried members having trouble creating families? If so, how does Patriot Front help? What ballpark percentage of members had families of their own before joining?
Okay, so I would say practically everybody who wants to create a family probably has some difficulty with something. I mean, there's a lot of difficulty which goes into it, even not including all the ways in which society is flawed and the stock of our nation is lackluster in certain respects and areas. Again, precise percentages of how many men had families before joining, I'm not sure. A lot of men have families in the organization. A lot of men have families as members of the organization. There's men who are dutiful and active members of the organization with upwards of 6 children, right? So sometimes you hear men say, oh, well, I can't do that because I'm a dad. Well, you're wrong because all these other men can do it, right? And I don't think, if somebody says, oh, well, I'm a dad or oh, I'm a business owner or oh, well, I do this other thing, which means that I can't do this. It's like, I don't think you are so much more of a family man or so much more of a business owner or so much more of that compared to the hundreds and hundreds of other men in the organization that make this work. I don't think all those guys don't care about their kids. I think it's a time management and a priority issue in a way. And it's not even setting a priority. It's about syndicating your priorities. It's about understanding that, again, a family's great, but and this just ties back into the Coeur d'Alene thing. You had people talking about like, oh, well, they came from out of town. They came from out of town. And that guy was from Georgia, or that guy was from Alabama, or that guy was from Texas, but we need to be handling these things locally. It's like, well, evidently you can't. Evidently we need, there's on one hand, you have the entire globe of neoliberal political and finance influence. And on the other hand, you have one decently small town. I think, if you allow them to defeat you in detail, they will every single time, right? So same thing with families, right? You can have the perfect life, but you are not the entire thing. You need to be connected, right? It's and the same people that get into the whole prepper thing. Would you rather have a bunch of rifles without an army, or would you rather have an army without rifles, right? Which is going to be more widely applicable? Which are you going to be able to use in more circumstances? Obviously, it's the latter, right? That's what Patriot Front is. We are an army without armament. We're useful in every circumstance, right? Outside of things that we don't want to do, like violence, of course. But anyways, that answers the question. I think I answered every part of that.
What books are you currently reading? What books do you recommend American kids read to understand American history?
Okay, so currently, I have been actually 2 podcasts ago, I had a lackluster response because I didn't remember some of the books I've read. But I've recently read the Journals of Lewis and Clark, the North Pole, written in 1910 by Robert E. Perry. He was the American who discovered the North Pole. He did not describe Agartha, but maybe he just missed it. I have also read recently, I've been reading the works of Ezra Pound. I have read a short story from the Civil War era called A Man with No Country, which I do like if you can find a thrift, an old copy of it. And I also read before that, I read My First Summer in the Sierra by John Muir, a famous American naturalist. And currently I am reading some of the speeches of Theodore Roosevelt, which are always good. And like I said, I'm reading some of Ezra Pound, and I'm reading whenever I can get to it. I usually do most of my reading while I travel. So it's tough to read a book that I don't feel comfortable traveling with. I have like a 1908 copy of an Andrew Jackson biography, which is very beautiful, but it's not something that I would throw in a backpack. That I've been reading from time to time by Cyrus Townsend Brady, who is a very good historian. I like his diction quite a lot. I would say so. Youth reading. Theodore Roosevelt was actually a very prolific author, and I do think he has a very readable style. I also read The Rough Riders recently. I think The Rough Riders is a very good story. It's a narrative, it's an adventure, but it's also firsthand, it's political. It teaches you a lot of lessons about life as a young man or as a man in general. So I would say that's good. And Francis Parkman is also a very good historian. I find him to be very readable. His book, The California and Oregon Trail, is a very good one, which talks about America in the 1930s, the Great Expanse. So yes, I would say those are good for the youth. I would say look into those.
All right.
Or go to antique shops and you can find history
yeah.
books.
Yeah.
You can find history books like that are 100. I have a few of them that I reference and that I get, graphics from sometimes for our booklets and things. But you can find 100-year-old history textbooks which are devoid of a lot of the slander that you see nowadays, or like old dime novel westerns, that are before a lot of the stuff, just for entertainment reading, just to teach kids how to build up a literary habit.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for answering that barrage of questions.
Yeah, our audience has been so supportive. We truly
I do
appreciate
this all
it.
day.
Can you tell the audience where to find you, since you are banned on almost every social media platform?
Yes, absolutely. So you can go to patriotfront.us, the website. And actually, if you want to go to the social tab of the website, if you see it up there at the top, you'll be able to see all of the accounts that we can maintain on Telegram, Gab. I think we're on Odyssey, and even BitChute for the 3 people who might still have a BitChute account. But we're on all these platforms and we try to keep all of our content up to date. Telegram is the best place where you can find most of our content. But, just follow us, find out where our stuff. And again, if you want to help share our content, and you have accounts in these other places, do so with caution, of course, because sometimes I feel like it's easier to post a Hitler speech on X than it is one of mine, but do so at your own risk if you want to share our content on these platforms and help other people see what we have to say. But otherwise, Telegram is probably the best place to find most of our things. And even then, if you don't want to do any of that, you can just go to our website, read the content there, watch the videos there, and you can even scroll a feed of our Telegram on our website without having to download the app or anything of that nature. And I really appreciate everybody who has been interested in watching, and everybody who I hope I have taught something, or they are elucidated in some manner about the status, motivation, or direction of the organization. And thank you all very much for having me.
Oh, of course. It was such a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have a good
I'll
day.
have to come into the studio sometime.
Yeah.
We'd love that. Bye.
Thank you so much
Very
for
good.
joining us. Very good discussion. A lot of super chats.
Yeah,
Wow.
thank you guys so much. You've been so generous.
All right, we've got some sponsors we've got to read. We've got to thank. We've got to thank, first of all, Idaho Tallow Company. Where's my cursor? Where's my cursor? North Idaho Tallow Company. They sell soap and skincare products without endocrine disruptors. So if you're worried about soap making you gay or perhaps disrupting your endocrine system, then you should be
Or
checking
making you
out
gayer.
North Idaho Tallow Company. And of course, they've got a, let's see if it pulls up, a signature Valentine's Day gift box that is ready to gift with a special limited edition Valentine's Day scent. And I have no earthly idea what that scent is, but I bet it's amazing. So the order cutoff for this is the end of the month. So if you've got a special someone in your life that you'd like to get a nice present for and you don't want to go to the hassle of wrapping, you can go to idahotallow.com and get them a gift, and they will love it. They will appreciate it. We've also got to give a big shout out to ODGG Supply if you are trying to get prepped in case there is any ice disruptions in your city and you're worried that you'll be stranded, perhaps at work. You got to make your way home. You would want to have a nice rucksack full of
Let's be honest, some of
supplies
this
and
stuff
equipment.
just looks cool.
It does look
also.
cool.
Yeah.
So please go blanky mode by visiting odggsupply.com and follow them across all of their social media platforms. They're on X, they're on Instagram, they're on YouTube. Usually their handle is PNW Gorilla.
Yes.
Not GOR, it's
The warfare style.
GUE. ODGGsupply.com. Also got to give a big shout out to Above Time Coffee Roasters. They make small batch premium hand roasted coffee, and it's absolutely excellent. It powers the show. I would not be vertical or upright 90% of the time if it weren't for AboveTimeCoffee.com. And if you use promo code Backlash10, you'll get 10% off of your order. They've got some wonderful stuff. The Blonde Nordic Roast, I'm about to crack into. I think we've got some of this medium roast that I'm going to crack into. So very good stuff. Please visit AboveTimeCoffee.com. And, of course, Antelope Hill Publishing. They are fighting to keep history alive amidst a regime of anti-white censorship and to help equip a new generation of dissidents with the information needed to fight the anti-white regime. Their varied catalog includes a newly updated and expanded edition of Dr. Kevin MacDonald's Culture of Critique, the essential modern text on Jewish identity, as well as Ricardo Duchesne's magnum opus, Greatness and Ruin, the definitive scholarly examination of European exceptionalism, as well as works by Kerry Bolton, Paul Kersey, and Josh Neal. Antelope Hill recently brought David Irving's iconic Nuremberg the Last Battle back into print, and they've got numerous translations of historical works from eras such as Fascist Italy, National Socialist Germany, Civil War Spain, all previously unavailable in English. There are also plenty of books on contemporary issues such as transgenderism, the opioid crisis, and Christian nationalism, as well as history books, novels, and children's books. So whatever your interest is, you're bound to find books that you'll like at Antelope Hill, all professionally published with sleek, modern cover art. So help us and help our people by checking out companies that share our values and fight for our cause. Visit antelopehillpublishing.com. And lastly, atlasbullion.com/backlash. If you are saving all of your money in US dollars, you're screwed.
Yeah, what are you doing?
What are you doing, bud? They're talking about arresting Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed. There's others that are saying that the Federal Reserve is going to be disbanded. Apparently, that was actually a point in Project 2025, the abolition of the Fed. So you want to make sure that you are saving in something other than US dollars, and there's nothing better than atlasbullion.com/backlash. They've got the best prices on the internet, so you can stock up on gold and silver. They've even got plans as low as $55 a month for silver subscriptions, $200 a month for gold subscriptions. So make a plan, save your money, save your financial. You're gonna get steamrolled if you're not buying
The quality of the show
precious
goes
metals.
so far down when we get tired.
Bro, I want to nap. I want to go blankie mode right now. But yeah, atlasbullion.com/backlash. And of course, all of those links are available on our website. If you go to affiliate links, there's a whole bunch of different stuff. Bitcoin hardware, beef snacks, all kinds of stuff that you can get. And when you make purchases there, it helps us out as well. So thank you very much for supporting all of our patrons. And next week, speaking of patrons and advertising, we've got a big interview lined up for next week. J.D. Hall, author of The Hyphenated Heresy on Judeo-Christianity, will be joining us here on The Backlash to talk about Christian Zionism, this Judeo-Christian nonsense that's going on. A very good book, and we're looking forward to having him back on the show.
And we have so much to talk about on Wednesday.
Oh, my God. There's
It's going to be a big show on Wednesday.
We got like news cucked on this ICE stuff last week, really.
I know,
But
we really did. We'll talk about it this week. Anyway, we are The Backlash. Check out all of our links on thebacklash.net/subscribe. We will see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Bye.